Margaret sat by her window, watching the leaves fall, each one a tiny sigh of autumn. At 78, her world had shrunk to the comfortable confines of her cozy cottage and the occasional visits from her children and grandchildren. She had built a good life, she thought, a life filled with the simple joys of family, hard work on their small farm, and the unwavering love of her husband, Thomas, gone now almost 10 years. They'd had 5 children, a boisterous, sprawling clan that filled her life with noise and laughter, and the occasional, inevitable squabble. She had poured her heart and soul into raising them, instilling in them the values of hard work, honesty, and the importance of family bonds. Their farm, nestled in the rolling hills outside of town, had been the backdrop to it all. It wasn't vast or grand, but it had provided for them, teaching the children the rhythms of nature and the rewards of tending the land. As the children grew and moved away, finding their own paths, their own families, the farm operations scaled back. Now the land was leased, providing a steady income that, combined with smart investments Thomas had made, meant Margaret was comfortable. More than comfortable, in fact. The years of careful saving, the frugal lifestyle, it had all added up. Her children were grown now, successful in their own rights, scattered across the country. They visited when they could, filling the cottage with their voices and the laughter of her grandchildren, reminding her of the bustling house it used to be. Margaret cherished these visits, even as she sometimes felt a quiet ache for the days when her children were all under one roof, their lives more intertwined. One summer afternoon, her youngest daughter, Clara, called. Clara, the artist of the family, the sensitive one, who had always felt things deeply. She lived furthest away, pursuing her passion for painting. "Mom," Clara said, her voice hesitant, "I've been thinking about Nana Elsie." Nana Elsie was Margaret's mother, now 92, living in a small, slightly neglected house across town. Elsie was a complicated woman, fiercely independent, sharp-tongued, and often difficult. She hadn't been the easiest mother, and her relationship with Margaret had always been fraught with unspoken tensions and old hurts. As Elsie had aged, she'd become more fragile, more isolated. Her other grandchildren, busy with their own lives, visited rarely. "What about Nana Elsie?" Margaret asked, a familiar weariness creeping into her voice. Caring for Elsie from afar, managing her bills, her appointments, it was a constant worry. I I want to move closer, Mom," Clara said, "to Havenwood. And, and I want to help take care of Nana Elsie. She shouldn't be alone." Margaret was stunned. Clara, who craved space and freedom, offering to step into the demanding role of caregiver for the difficult Elsie. "Clara, are you sure? It's a lot. Nana Elsie can be trying." "I know, Mom," Clara replied, her voice firm, "but she's family, and she needs someone." So, Clara moved to Havenwood, finding a small apartment near her grandmother's house. She began visiting Elsie daily, helping with groceries, appointments, cleaning, and simply being there. It wasn't easy. Elsie was demanding, critical, never satisfied. Clara bore the brunt of her grandmother's difficult moods with remarkable patience, a quiet determination that Margaret admired from a distance. Margaret's other children were less enthusiastic about Clara's decision. Her oldest son, Thomas Jr., a busy lawyer, expressed concern. "Is Clara really equipped for this, Mom? Nana can be difficult. Maybe a professional caregiver would be better." Or, "Well, we know finances aren't an issue for you. We could look into assisted living." Her daughter, Sarah, a no-nonsense accountant, was more blunt. "It seems a bit much, Clara dropping everything. Is she doing this out of duty? Or is she hoping for something down the line?" The unspoken question hung in the air. Was Clara positioning herself for a larger share of Elsie's modest inheritance? Margaret bristled at the implication. "Clara's doing it because it's the right thing to do," she said, her voice sharp. But the seed of doubt had been planted, nurtured by a society that often viewed acts of generosity through a cynical lens. Her other children, responsible and successful, rarely offered more than financial support for Elsie's needs, citing their busy lives, their own families, the distance. Clara's physical presence, her daily care, felt like a quiet reproach to their absence, creating an uncomfortable tension within the family. Despite the subtle disapproval, Clara remained steadfast. She cared for Elsie with a gentle devotion that slowly, miraculously, began to soften the old woman's edges. Elsie, though still difficult at times, seemed to bloom under Clara's consistent kindness. They shared quiet meals, looked through old photo albums, and Elsie even began sharing stories from her past, tales of hardship and resilience that Clara listened to with genuine interest. Clara wasn't just a caregiver, she was a companion, a bridge across the chasm of Elsie's loneliness. Margaret visited when she could, witnessing the bond that had formed between her daughter and her mother. It was a complex mix of emotions, relief that Elsie was being cared for, pride in Clara's selflessness, and a lingering sadness for the difficult relationship she herself had with Elsie. A relationship Clara seemed to be healing through her simple presence and unwavering love. Years passed. Elsie's health declined, and Clara's care became more intensive. She moved into Elsie's small house, providing round-the-clock support, sacrificing her painting time, her social life, her own needs to ensure her grandmother was comfortable and loved in her final years. She did it without complaint, without asking for help, embodying a quiet strength that humbled Margaret. When Elsie finally passed away, peacefully in her own bed with Clara holding her hand, the family gathered for the funeral. The cottage, filled with her children, their spouses, and grandchildren, felt both full and empty without Elsie's sharp presence. After the funeral, the family lawyer, Mr. Davison, gathered them in Margaret's living room for the reading of Elsie's will. The atmosphere was tense, a mixture of grief and unspoken anticipation. The farm, the business interests, the bulk of Margaret's estate was hers, of course. But Elsie had her own small assets. The house, some savings, a few investments. Who would inherit what? The cynical speculation about Clara's motives hung faintly in the air. Mr. Davison cleared his throat and began to read. He spoke of Elsie's wishes, her final bequests. Small sums were left to various charities, modest amounts to her grandchildren. Then he addressed the disposition of her main assets. To my daughter Margaret, Mr. Davison read, I leave my personal belongings, my jewelry, and a sum of money sufficient to cover any outstanding expenses related to my care and passing. Margaret nodded, expecting the rest to be divided among her children. And to my granddaughter Clara, Mr. Davison continued, his voice calm, who has cared for me with unwavering love and devotion in my final years, sacrificing her own life to ensure my comfort and happiness, I leave my house located at 14 Elm Street and the remainder of my estate. A stunned silence fell over the room. Thomas Jr.'s eyes widened. Sarah's jaw dropped. The other children exchanged bewildered glances. Elsie's house, her primary asset, and the bulk of her savings were going to Clara. Not divided equally among the 5 children, as might have been expected, but given almost entirely to the one who had provided the care. The silence stretched, thick with surprise and for some discomfort. Clara sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap, her expression one of profound sadness for her grandmother, not triumph. Thomas Jr. was the first to speak, his lawyer's mind already dissecting the implications. The entire house? And the remainder? Are you sure, Mr. Davison? That seems disproportionate. Those were Mrs. Thorne's explicit instructions, Mr. Davison replied calmly. She amended her will 2 years ago. She wished for Clara to be compensated for her years of selfless care. Sarah spoke, her voice tight. Compensated? Clara wasn't a hired caregiver. She was doing her duty as a granddaughter. Duty, perhaps, Margaret said softly, speaking for the first time, her voice firm. She looked at her children, at their surprised and, in some cases, resentful faces. But it was a duty none of you were willing to fulfill, not to the extent Clara did. She gave up years of her life, her work, her independence, to care for her grandmother. She wasn't expecting anything in return. She did it out of love. She looked at Clara, her heart overflowing with pride and a fierce, protective love. This isn't about money, Margaret continued, addressing her children. It's about recognition. Your Nana Elsie saw Clara's sacrifice. She saw her love, and she chose to honor it in the only way she felt she could. The room was quiet again, the weight of Margaret's words settling over them. They remembered their excuses, their distance, their subtle judgments of Clara. They had been so focused on their own lives, on what seemed fair in terms of financial division, that they had failed to truly see the immeasurable value of the care Clara had provided, the quiet love she had given. Thomas Jr. shifted uncomfortably. Sarah looked down at her hands. They were successful, responsible people. Yes, but in this moment, they felt smaller. Their calculated lives put into perspective by Clara's simple, profound act of love and Elsie's final testament to its worth. There were no further objections. The will was settled. In the following months, the tension in the family slowly eased. The initial shock and discomfort gave way to a grudging, then genuine, respect for Clara. Her siblings saw that she didn't squander the inheritance. She used some of it to settle old debts, some to invest in her art career, and she kept Elsie's house, turning it into a cozy home and a studio. She didn't flaunt her inheritance or make demands on her siblings. She remained the same quiet, kind, dedicated Clara. Margaret often visited Clara in Elsie's old house. It felt different now, lighter, filled with the scent of turpentine and canvas, the colorful energy of Clara's paintings. They would sit and talk, their own relationship healed by the shared experience of caring for Elsie and by Clara's quiet example of unconditional love. One afternoon, sitting in Elsie's renovated living room, a space now filled with light and art, Margaret looked at Clara. "You know," she said softly, "some of your siblings thought that you had ulterior motives." Clara smiled gently. "I know, Mom. It hurt a little, but it doesn't matter. Nana Elsie knew my heart, and you know my heart." Margaret reached out and took her daughter's hand. "Yes, darling, I do." She thought about Elsie, about her complicated mother, who in the end saw clearly, who recognized the true value of presence, of sacrifice, of a love that shows up not when it's easy, but when it's needed most. Elsie's will wasn't just a distribution of assets. It was a final, profound statement on what truly matters in life. It was a lesson in legacy, proving that the greatest inheritance we leave behind is not always measured in dollars and cents, but in the love we give and the lives we touch. Clara, the quiet caregiver, had received her inheritance, not just of property, but of a profound understanding of love's true wealth. And in doing so, she had, perhaps unexpectedly, healed a family.